Alright, now we're going to do an exercise with this ball and talk about the main concepts for a realistic drawing. I actually have a list, a sort of script that I will leave it on this course for you, and it talks about basically some steps that you can follow and certain references, some main points, like the shadow lines, and it goes through the motions, through the main steps on the construction of a drawing. And I actually call drawing in steps. So it's kind of a script that you can always use as a reference so you don't get lost on a drawing. And I usually leave it on the side of the drawing, or like on the board that I'm using, or close by the easel, so I can always look at it and kind of check, if I'm following the right steps, if I'm not, sometimes you just get lost in the drawing. So just something that you can use as a reference for the construction of the drawing, right? And so the first thing is that in the side size method, you need to check if the surface, if the board or the canvas, it's on the vertical position, right? Because the other way it does not alter the perspective. If the board is too inclined, for example, the bottom part will be closer to your eye than the top part, and that way the perspective will be a little bit messed up. So it's important that is always vertical. So I use the plumb line to see if in this case, if the board is vertical and is vertical enough. I can also check, for example, the side here of this drawing, just to check if it's vertical. If the board is, in this case, is not too inclined to the side, for example, because that would affect the perspective, right? Let's say the shadow line would be a little bit tilted, it would be weird. So it's good that everything is just in the right place and in the same alignment. So check with the plumb line again, just to see if I put it back to the right place. And I think it's alright. Okay. So I put this original print here, and I'm going to choose a paper. It's best that if it's as close as possible without anything in between them, so you avoid having interferences, in your vision. I could use a white paper here, but I actually will try to find a paper that is closer to the values on the drawing. For example, this one, it seems like the values of the background is quite close to the value of the paper, but the ball itself, it has this kind of sort of creamish color, and I think this paper will be best and leave the highlights, in the half tones kind of the paper. So I think this paper is best for this one. If I use a light one, for example, I will have to do a lot of the half tones, like to draw a lot of the half tones and leave only the highlight as a color of the paper. So it will be just more trouble. So now the paper is here. And of course you can start with a linear drawing, but the method that I use is thinking about masses, right? So this drawing here is from a friend of mine from Brazil, Emerson Ferrandini. He's an artist that he gave this example here. He starts with a linear drawing, and then he goes progressing, adding the shapes of the drawings, and of course increasing the range of values little by little. So at the beginning you see it's just light tones and just separating light and shadow, and you can see the shadow shapes and the light shapes. And in this drawing here, for example, the shape of the shadow is like this sort of heart shape that is kind of cut a little bit, kind of sliced. And even inside the shadow on the ball, I can divide a darker tone and then another dark tone here and then a lighter area. So you can divide even inside the shape, like different shapes, and here you have like a half tone and then the white shape. So simplification means that basically you're going to see the object in the most simple way as you can. So seeing in an abstract way, and you're not focusing on details, right? You're just focusing on the big shapes of it, and you start the drawing doing that, so then it becomes easier for you to get the proportions right, so that the whole ball correctly, and the proportions and everything before you start focusing on details, right? If you start shading too much and putting too many details at the beginning, it will be harder for you to erase later, because there's too many details and too many distractions. So in the side size method, you always start doing some marks. So I'll mark here the top of the original object, or in this case the print that I'm copying. It doesn't need to be extremely precise. You can always just correct later. So just marking the top and the bottom of the ball, and the shadow, the cast shadow, and you do the same whatever it is with the entire composition or just one object. You do the same, you measure the top, the bottom, even the distances between objects, between shadow shapes and light shapes. And if you need to be further away in case of bigger compositions, you measure from a distance. In this case, I can touch the paper because it's just a flat paper on the surface. And here I'm using, at least taking the distance of my arm length, because if I draw too close, I will have a certain perspective if I'm drawing from, say, from this side or that side. So it's nice that you're kind of in the middle between the drawing and the paper. Not the drawing, I mean the object and the paper. One thing that we can do also is to have a line in the middle of the original object, and just that goes through certain points. There are like specific points, and I can also make a line on the paper or the surface. I'm gonna use a ruler for that. You can also hang a line, let's say in a composition, on a still life in front of it, and then you do a line on a canvas or your paper. Let me just see if the ruler is actually vertical. I think it is. From my perspective, I think it is. So I trace a line. That I'm gonna erase it later anyway. And you can put a line here in front of the original object, or in this case the print, just to have a reference, right? And you use this line as a reference. So I say, what's the distance from the line to the edge here on the left? And okay, let's just mark here the line so I can actually use my hand. So I can come here and then I measure this distance from the line to the edge, and then I measure there, and I know, okay, the edge will be around here. The same thing on the other side, from the line to the edge, and okay, the edge should be around here. And I can use this line for basically any point in the drawing. Let's say from the tip of the shadow, from the line in the middle of the ball to the tip of the shadow, what is that distance? And then I know that the tip of the shadow will be around here, for example. And these are just marks. You can, it's just as a starting point, right? You can, of course, keep changing and erase it, and just keep moving things around. And it's good to train how to see those things with the naked eye. So we start doing marks, when you're doing copies from old masters and Charles Bark, for example. So you start making those marks, and you go doing these exercises to train your eyes. But in time, then you can just see those distances and the right proportions without actually the need of using all these tools. Of course, it's always useful, but it's nice that you train yourself to do that with the naked eye, as I'm actually going to do here. I'm not going to measure so much. Just to check here the bottom. And actually, I'm using the pencil now, but I'm going to switch later to charcoal just so I can get all the range of values that you can see here.